Hey folks, Marco here. This is Crash Your ComfyUI ComfyUI Crash Course. Prereqs for the video are the same as before. Sack of goodies for this week contains all the files used in the video. You go to my Patreon page and scroll down and realize that none of my content is behind paywall. You then close the tab and go to Civitai where you can grab my sack with or without account. And on that merry note, let's begin. Alright, so as before, I will import the workflow provided. Click Reset View and then zoom out. To begin, let's put together groups 1 and 2 and then preview the output. An important thing I forgot to mention in the previous video is clip skip. So where is clip skip in ComfyUI? Clip skip goes under the name clip set last layer. That is what it's called. So if the checkpoint you are using requires clip skip, this is how you set it. A notable difference is that ComfyUI uses negative numbers, but it is the same thing. So if I now connect this to here and here as well, and then run the workflow, I will get a different image. I won't be using clip skip in this video, but I just thought I should let you guys know in case you need it. And now that that's out of the way, let's add groups 3 and 4 to the workflow. As you may recall from our previous video, I have provided you with the mask, but I have also said that you can use preview bridge to load the mask and then send it on. This time I did not provide you with a mask. In fact, I have this strange group located here that seems to construct the mask. Now, before I explain this group, have I told you guys how much I hate hand-waving explanations? To those who haven't had the pleasure, it is when your lecturer flicks through PowerPoint slides very rapidly, and instead of showing all the steps and proofs, they wave their hand at the equations like there's some kind of abstract form of art that they have to explain away. Then they wonder why so few students turn up for their lecture. Sorry, I got issues. So rather than me waving my metaphorical hand at this group and quote explaining it to you, let me take you aside over here. Let me introduce you to a node called solid mask. And I'm going to make width and height of the mask match that of the image. And now I will use a node called join image with alpha. And when I connect it, this is the output. It looks identical, doesn't it? Although we don't see it, our image now actually has alpha layer, the 4th channel that controls transparency. Now let's add another solid mask and another node called mask composite. Suppose we want our mask to be a square 64 pixels by 64. And now I'm just going to change this from multiply to add, and then I'm going to connect these two into the mask composite, which then leads towards this node here. And let's see what happens. Well, look at that. We have just discovered two things. Firstly, origin of ComfyUI's coordinate system is top left corner. And secondly, positive direction for the y-axis is actually downwards. Having y-axis pointed downwards is actually quite common in some fields, like for example geophysics. That is my academic background. Nobody likes to work with negative numbers, so it makes perfect sense to orient the reference frame in a way that is convenient to you. Now, I know that calling a parameter value isn't particularly informative, but what value stands for is transparency. 0 transparency means fully opaque. 1 transparency means fully transparent. This is important because there are software packages that have it other way around. You don't set transparency, you set the opacity. The higher the value, more opaque something is. Now, we want our mask to be somewhere around here, right? To correctly position my mask, I must settle on the size of the mask, and I must settle on its coordinates, or more specifically, coordinates of the top left corner of the rectangle that I'm making. So it is really these two nodes that I am allowed to mess with. This one here, I must not touch. So actually, just a note to myself, I'm going to make it red as a reminder not to mess with it. So now looking at my image, and given that I want my pirate to be around here, we're going to decide how to position our rectangle. So what I've done here, I've divided 512 into 8 pieces, and I've divided 288 into 8 pieces. And now I will apply a mask. Top left corner of the rectangle is at 64 by 64, so that, see it says here in the corner, the sum is 128. So that's my x coordinate, and my y coordinate needs to be at 108. So I will enter 128 and 108 as x and y. And for the size of my rectangle, x is obviously going to be the same, 128, and vertical is going to be 180. So I am going to enter those numbers as well. And there's my rectangle. Easy. So what I do with this node is I set 0 to entire image. With the second node, I mask rectangle, 128 by 180 in this case. And this one sets the coordinates of the rectangle of its top left corner. An operation determines what happens with the values. Do you want transparency to be added at each pixel? Do you want it multiplied? Do you want it subtracted? If I set this to multiply, the mask will disappear because 1 times 0 is 0. So there is no mask in the end. Because 0 plus 1 is 1, that's why I have it as add. And for all intents and purposes, this node here is really just preview mask. One thing you need to keep in mind though is that this image here is not the same as this one here, because this one has 3 channels and this one has 4. If you are a digital artist, you know exactly what that means, but just for benefit of those who do not, the color of any given pixel on an image can be represented as a mixture of red, green, and blue colors. A mathematical term for such a mixture is linear combination. So in addition to these 3 channels, certain file types like PNG files also have the 4th channel called alpha channel. That is the channel that controls the transparency. So what I'm saying to you now is this image here has all 4 channels, whereas this one here only has 3. So now you understand why I have this extra reroute node sitting here. You might be thinking, but you already have an image here. Why did you put this one? It's because this is the one we actually need to use. This one is just for previewing. In fact, if you were to pass this into the detailer, you will get an error. So let's preview this mask quickly. So my numbers are slightly different from what I've used above, but that's all right. So now that we know what is going on, let's connect these groups and see the outputs. And as you can see, output is exactly as we expected. So now that we know what is going on, we can assemble the rest of the workflow and run it. If your output looks different from mine, this could be on my end. Let me restart ComfyUI and then run this whole thing again. So yeah, I think your output will most likely look like this. As I'm recording this, I must admit I actually don't know why restarting the ComfyUI has changed my output, because this workflow loads both cyber-realistic and cyber-realistic in-painting model. It is possible that somewhere internally ComfyUI used the wrong model of the two to do the sampling. Oh well. To finish off for today, I have a couple of fun facts, or did you know? As you move these groups around, if you were to click on any of the nodes like this, the node moves a tiny bit and you might think, oh, did my hand just twitch? No, your hand didn't twitch. You just have snap to grid turned on. But the problem is snap to grid only works for nodes. So when you move things as a group, that whacks everything out of alignment. The way to align everything very easy and very quickly is Control A, and then you shift click on any one node. Watch what happens. Okay? Everything in the whole workflow is grid aligned. Fun fact number 2. Let me duplicate this node here. Each node has 2 types of inputs. For example, clip text encode. You might think that this node only takes 1 input, but remember, you're also typing your prompt here. In ComfyUI, there are 2 kinds of node inputs. You have widget inputs. Those are inputs you provide by configuring the widgets of the node, by entering your prompt, for example, or by setting different values at each widget. The other kind of input is the one that comes from here. Now, these ones don't have a specific name that I'm aware of, so I created my own. I'm just calling them connection inputs because they come from a connection with another node. So widget inputs and connection inputs. What you need to keep in mind, however, is that each node has a function, a single function that performs the task you give it to. And the function doesn't distinguish between the two. Case in point, if we look at clip text encode under the hood, you will see that the function that does the job, that does our work, really only has 2 inputs, clip and text. And it doesn't really know where either of these came from. And precisely because they are indistinguishable, I can change one for the other. For example, widget input to connection input. So my clip text encode now becomes this. Why is this important, you ask? Well, 2 reasons. Firstly, you might import someone's workflow and suddenly notice that their nodes do not look like anything you have seen. And now you know why. It is possible that they have done that. They have converted one of the inputs from widget into connection. And at this point, you might wonder, but widget inputs are convenient. Why on earth would someone want this? Well, it can be handy in certain situations, like when you want to control a parameter from a single central point. Remember how I marked this node in red as a reminder to myself itself, not to change any of the parameters. That's because width and height need to match with the dimensions of my image. Let me just quickly see. ComfyUI has a node called primitive. The name of this node is a programming term, so nothing to do with the lack of civility of any kind. Primitive data type is the most basic type of data that is built into the programming language. So primitive node is like a shapeshifter node. It changes based on the primitive input you connected to. Let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to duplicate it a few times. In programming, a whole number is referred to as integer or int. Decimal number is referred to as a floating point or float. Text is referred to as string. So watch what happens if I connect this to a string input. See, now this node has string output. Keep in mind that what is and isn't primitive data type also depends based on the language. To anyone who has done programming in C, string is not a primitive data type. It is an array of characters. So the lowest building block is a character. So why is this important? Well, if my workflow requires alignment between two nodes, if I want to make sure that any changes to width and height here also update here, I can make that happen using primitive nodes. So for both of these nodes, I will change widget inputs, width and height into connection inputs, and then I will connect them to primitive. So now each time I update width and height on these two nodes, it will update on both of these. All right. Anyway, I will just get rid of this now. So in this workflow, we have done detailing sequentially. First, we did detailing on the pirate, then we did detailing on the island. So for your homework, you're going to do the same thing in parallel. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're giving me homework, man? Let's please. Okay, fair point. But listen, there is such a thing as too much segs. Sometimes you have to be picky. This is what these picker nodes are for. If you're detailing hands on a character and your detailer picked up 2 automatically, sure, no problem. But what if you want left hand to have a ring, but not the right hand? What if you want left eye to be of one color, but the right eye of the other? And of course, if your image has 2 subjects, then you most certainly have to separate the prompts. And before we wrap up for today, I want to thank you all for the kind words you have left on YouTube, Reddit, and Discord. Statistics look encouraging as well. There may be hope for this channel yet. Please like and subscribe, and if you can afford it, please consider buying me a coffee on either of these platforms. Thank you for watching, and class dismissed.